Teams hate making trades early in the season, but there are a couple of situations unfolding right now that could force the hands of teams like Utah and maybe even Montreal to do something. To discuss that, here's insider Pierre LeBrun with early trade talk. Pierre, let's start in Utah, where the hockey club has got some holes on the blue line right now.
Yeah, long-term injuries to Sean Durzi, who's the latest, and of course we knew about John Marino from earlier this month. Marino gone at least until the new year. Sean Durzi gone until early April in all likelihood. Two top four defensemen, very hurtful to what Utah's trying to do here. And, you know, context is important here. If this was the old Arizona days, Gino, they'd probably say, we're rebuilding. If we lose, we lose. We'll get a higher draft pick. That's not the mindset with the Utah Hockey Club. New market, new owner. They want to be way more competitive this year. And so because of that, there is some added pressure to see how they can cope with these injuries. The early decision, from what we're told, from the Utah front office led by GM Bill Armstrong, is they're going to try to cope from within, look at internal options. They've already made a call up and basically try to survive these injuries. But I do think that if the losses pile up, that they are going to be forced into more meaningful trade discussion. And even already, from talking to other sources around the league, I'm told that Bill Armstrong certainly is calling around at least to get an idea if he decides to go down that route. And one of the players I'm told he's checked on is Ivan Provorov, the pending UFA defenseman from the Columbus Blue Jackets. I mean, Provorov is going to be in high demand closer to March 7th, trade deadline. My sense, though, is that the Blue Jackets may not be ready at this point to deal him. I mean, they want to leave this roster alone for now, let this team have a chance. Let them fight it out early this year. And I don't think they want to take away from the roster too early in the season. But the fact is that all things being equal, if the Blue Jackets go with the kind of predictions that most people have for their season, Provorov will be among the rental players moved by March 7th. And the reason I think for Utah, a rental player would be more appealing than a guy with term is because Sean Durzi and John Marino are coming back at some point. So I know that a lot of people might look at that and say, hello, the Leafs would be open to moving Timothy Liljegren, who might be looking for a change of scenery. Why wouldn't Utah look at Liljegren? And who knows, maybe they will eventually. But for right now, I don't think he's that appealing because he's got term on his deal. He's got another year in his deal next year. Well, where does he fit after Durzi and Marino come back and so on? So I think the rental piece is probably where Utah will go if they decide to make a trade. But for now, they want to stay internal and see if they can survive these injuries.
What about the Habs, Pierre? The plan out of the gate was to take a step towards challenging for a playoff spot this season, but they're dead last in the division right now, second last in the conference. I know it's still early, but could they be looking to fill some holes before they fall so far behind that they can't recover?
Well, Gino, first of all, let's be real for a second here. I know what was said or maybe not said at the start of the year. The reality is, internally, my understanding is I don't think they felt the playoffs were realistic. Okay? But certainly I think there's pressure internally and externally to take a meaningful step this year and play some meaningful hockey later into the year. That's true. And because of that, I don't think the slow start is being ignored here by the Habs. And what I'm being told from talking to teams around the league is that GM Ken Hughes has started to call around, doing his due diligence, at least getting a sense of what potentially is out there, because I think the Canadians would be open to making a move here that would, help sort of, shake up the makeup a bit here and help this team, win some games. The reality, though, is that there are almost no trades at this time of year. We know that in the cap system. And so I don't think there's anything imminent for Montreal. But I think it's noteworthy that, the Habs aren't just sitting there and saying, oh, well, we're off to a slow start. That's life. No, I think that it has fueled Kent Hughes to maybe make more calls than he might have this early in the season. And so we'll see where it leads. But a couple of things I think that I'd have to point out. One is that the Habs aren't going to mortgage the future in any kind of deal. I mean, the long term still trumps all. The other thing is that, they're right at the cap. So it's got to be apple for apple in terms of a salary coming in, a salary going out, which also adds to the difficulty of making that kind of trade this early in the year. But again, the point being, from what we're hearing from other teams around the league, is Kent Hughes is making his calls. So we'll see where it goes.
We're now just over 5 weeks to the deadline where teams got to submit their rosters for the Four Nations Cup to be played this February. We've spoken a lot about Team Canada's scouting, and you just spoke to Team Finland's general manager, Jari Lehtinen, this morning.
Yeah, Jari Lehtinen pretty excited about putting this team together. Just like Canada and the U.S. and Sweden, that December 2nd deadline is pretty early. Now, obviously Finland doesn't have as many NHL players to choose from compared to Canada and the U.S., but boy, they've got a good-looking lineup already, potentially. And, this is, and Jari Lehtinen agreed with this is as deep as Finland's ever been down the middle. I mean, you got Barkov, Aho, and Rupi Hintz, 1, 2, 3 down the middle. That's the kind of depth, star-wise, that Finland, honestly, I believe, and Jari Lehtinen agrees, has never had in best-on-best competition. So there you go from the get-go. And what that has produced, in terms of that kind of depth, is, well, who plays a fourth-line center role for Finland? You got a lot of candidates. Michael Granlund's been around forever. He plays center and wing. Eric Hall is a veteran. You have Anton Lundell, who's a young blossoming player for the Florida Panthers who just won a cup, and Jesperi Kotkaniemi, the former first-round pick of the Habs, playing in Carolina. Kotkaniemi is very much a bubble player in this conversation, I think, but he has played on the second line so far this year, Gino, centering Martin Necas and Jack Roslovic, and he's playing well. So these are big moments for Kotkaniemi if he wants to get in more seriously in this conversation and get Jari Lehtinen's attention. But I think it speaks to the depth at center for Finland that they're having these conversations, and they're fun ones to have for them.
Which will make for a good tournament. That's Early Trading Talk with Pierre LeBrun. The full Insider Trading with Pierre, CJ, and Darren is coming up on SportsCenter.